All right. Well, first, I would like to thank you for consistently sharing your SAP tips every Friday. And for the listeners' benefit, Sharon and Exactitude share SAP tips that are educational and actually super useful and action-based tips that anyone struggling with SAP could benefit from. So thank you on behalf of the ITAM, SAM, and software licensing community.
You're very welcome. I'm glad they're helpful.
Good stuff. So obviously I've seen your posts and noticed AI and RISE as common themes that could kind of quietly escalate costs within SAP environments. And as everyone's talking about AI licensing at the moment, I'd love for you to share your thoughts on AI and SAP. So from a SAM or IT leadership perspective, I mean, what's the real governance risk when it comes to SAP and AI?
I mean, it's interesting. So I'll answer your question in terms of what I'm seeing and then like what the governance risk is, if that's all right,
Yep,
Sean. So,
absolutely
I
fine.
mean, what I found is, and maybe you've seen it across other vendors as well, is that maybe about like 12, 18 months ago, everyone everywhere started talking about AI. But it's my view that there are some companies that seem to be have like a good handle on it in their posting about, the wins they've had in terms of productivity. But a lot of the folk I'm speaking to, whether it's SAP customers or not, everyone is still scratching their head going, okay, how do I get my heads around this? From an SAP licensing perspective, I saw definitely in the last 6 months of 2025 that there was AI units being included in cloud order forms that were being transacted between SAP and its customers. And in some cases, it was SAP customers, wanting to dip the toe in the water a bit. But in other cases, it was maybe SAP giving them as part as a as for free as part of an overall deal. So my view is that I think a lot of people are still getting to grips with it, really trying to figure out, okay, this looks like it might be good for us, but still kind of like thinking through the process. So how does that reflect then in what asset managers, software asset managers, and IT leadership need to be aware of? I think what we're going to find in the short term that these AI licenses are going to be underconsumed, but then very quickly maybe overconsumed. And what I mean by that, and I won't bore you with licensing technical details now, but at a very high level, there's like three types of groupings of AI licenses within the SAP licensing space at the moment. So if you've purchased or SAP Cloud ERP or other a private edition, otherwise known as Rise with SAP, there will be like basic AI included as part of that FUE full use equivalent license. Then you'll get the premium AI, and that's typically packages built for specific purposes, and that will be like a package number of like units for a specific business purpose for a specific role within an organization. And the devil is in the detail here because there's like a finite cap on the credits. But if you like go over that, then you can buy AI units or SAP will reserve the right to charge you for that. And then we have right at the top of the tier is for those like, enterprise organizations, they want to build their own things. They don't want to do it from scratch. And that's completely on consumption credits. So I think in the short term, people will see this skew in their order form and they might, I'm not saying every customer is this way, but some customers will be saying, all right, well, I need to figure out how to use these. But then very
Mhm.
quickly when they do, then they'll have, it might suddenly spike, right? Because if we look
Yep,
at
yep,
BTP, it might be that there's, it depends on who you've allocated the right to use these in the organization.
yep. No, I mean, it's interesting when it comes to AI. Obviously, prompts. Everyone will prompt differently because everyone communicates differently. So I can imagine that might have something to do with obviously who's given the access to it. Certainly, that might create an overconsumption quite quickly. So, how is AI currently being governed, or is it being governed properly in your experience?
Well, I think my experience is the same as most other consultants'
Hmm.
experience out there, is that it hasn't been around long enough to give. I mean, everyone may have their opinions on, what it's going to be and what it will be and so on. But I don't think we're far enough down the track yet that, I couldn't with a straight face say to you today, oh, well, I've supported X number of customers and I've
Yeah.
helped them optimize their AI licenses. Maybe like looking at it as part of like a Rise with SAP deal, how many do you need? Why do you think you might need them? Demand forecasting. But in terms
Hmm.
of active governance, I think a lot of people aren't actually utilizing them yet. I think that will change very quickly, but I think we're at the beginning of the journey. If a customer did want to manage it, SAP have a super useful tool called SAP for Me, where it gives a single view, I should say, of what cloud services and on-premise licenses you've purchased, but also what your consumption is for your cloud products. So if I was speaking to any software asset managers out there today, I would say get access to SAP for Me. There's an unlimited amount of accounts, and then go to that consumption tab. It won't tell you exactly, for example, you've purchased, in simple figures, 100 units and you're consuming 75, but it might say you're consuming, X percentage of the amount you've quantified. And you can keep a track on that then. And if you need to go a bit deeper, then you can go into the portal itself.
Okay, brilliant. And so, where can customers get that SAP for me? Where exactly can they find it?
So the website is me.sap.com.
Okay,
And
perfect.
if you're an existing SAP customer, you'll just need to require like a login. Typically, if maybe you're working in more of a commercial or business facing role and you've never had need to access the SAP support portal, you probably would need to maybe contact your internal SAP team for an SID, it's called, and then you get access to the portal itself. And then they have it structured in such a way that you can request specifically what access you require. So it means that nobody is given privileged access for what they need, but maybe like a finance or procurement team, they only need to see the finance and legal parts. Whereas maybe you have like a technical resource, they only need to see what systems are active, but they don't need to know how much your maintenance invoice is, that type
Yeah,
of thing.
perfect, perfect. Well, that's an absolute fantastic ITAM takeaway, I'm sure. Many people will be
I'll
loving
add it
that.
to my SAP tip now. It's good to know that you didn't know in a way, because sometimes it's trying to, okay, what would be useful versus what do people already know? So I'll make a note of that one, Sean, and I'll dedicate it to you, okay?
Perfect. Thank you very much. And so, if someone's downloaded SAP for me, what are the possible early warning signs that the SAM managers, procurement managers should look for?
Okay. Well, assuming you have your SID and you log into it, there you go into a tab called the Finance and Legal Dashboard, and then there's like subcategories within that, and you click in consumption. And if you can picture in your mind's eye like an ID code followed
Hmm.
by the description, and then it might have something like you have consumed 75% of your licenses. And of course, if you've overconsumed, it might show that you have consumed 146% of your licenses, and it'll have like a red warning flag. And then you can click into that, and then you can maybe go into the admin portal of that application, and maybe you need to drill down to see what's causing it. But what's nice about SAP for me, I wouldn't say it's an exact science, but at least it gives you indicators. So if you're like a super busy software asset manager, you don't have enough times in the day, maybe it's not possible to do an effective license position for everything every month or every quarter. But like going
Hmm.
into this portal, at least you can see if you're maybe approaching your consumption, or if you've your threshold, or you've already exceeded it. It's useful for that.
Brilliant, brilliant. So that's super useful, especially in this day and age when probably the adoption of AI is something that people are fighting with. So one organization might be exploding in usage, whereas another just creeping along and kind of, yeah, as you say, if you're not checking it, or maybe one day it might explode. So no, that's fantastic. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for that.
And one thing, just on that note as well, if you are tasked if you're in an organization in a procurement or compliance role, and you
Hmm.
have been tasked with, okay, how many do I need? And you're thinking, just like, finger in the air. SAP do have calculators for both AI credits, units, and BTP. So it's always worthwhile just like playing around with that as well. And you'll be able to, mightn't be an exact science, but at least you're not completely shooting in the dark, and you can get a rough idea for what things will cost. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so you've also consistently mentioned Rise. throughout today and also through your posts. And you've cited a lot of control issues that you manage already. So when an organization signs these RISE deals, where do Sam and IT leaders kind of most often lose commercial control in your opinion?
I think it's where Sam and procurement leaders could lose control is trying to negotiate the deal as if it's an on-premise deal. If you're doing that, it's going to be a recipe for disaster, right? Because whereas previously maybe you were an existing SAP customer, you had your infrastructure, maybe it was on-premise data servers, maybe it was AWS or Azure, and the business comes to you and says, "Hi, we need like, I don't know, 60 extra professional user licenses." Well, you go and you negotiate that, and you have a fair idea in your mind's eye that, okay, this is going to cost me maybe 17 or 22% of support, depending on what support package I'm on. That's when you're negotiating a RISE with SAP deal, you have to, it's like, you have to consider not only the subscriptions you want, but you need to know what you're going to need now versus maybe in a couple of years, so that maybe you need to ramp up the subscriptions. You need to understand the technical aspects of it as well. There is SAP for like RISE with SAP. They have a document called the Roles and Responsibilities Matrix, and that gives like a line item. I think it's something like about just under 1,500 line items now of what's included, what's excluded, what you need to pay extra for as an ongoing or an offgoing, and so on. And I find that a lot of customers, and quite rightly, you'll focus on the bill of materials, but meanwhile, there's this other beast that can really, bite you. And then, it can just mean that your relationship with SAP suffers from it, because of course then it's, well, why didn't you tell us? And then there's different people in SAP. So I would say, first off, understand the big picture, understand what's included, and then don't negotiate the deal in isolation, right? Meaning, consider not only your other colleagues that work in the technical space, but consider things as well. Like if, let's say you're on a hardware contract, when is that going to come to an end? Okay. Or if you have like a contract for Azure with Microsoft, and it turns out that, well, you've signed a multi-year commitment and that's not coming up for renewal for another 2 years, and you have no way of like reallocating to, if you move to RISE with SAP, you've no way of reallocating those hyperscaler costs. It's just like trying to balance everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you're not blowing your exactitude trumpet here, but I'm going to blow it for you. So that's exactly the reason why people should come to you when going through a RISE negotiation or trying to think about moving, because I guess the biggest risk is misunderstanding the deals. As you say, there's 1,400 lines, and on top of that, they also need to understand what their potential usage could be. So, I mean, that's why you should use you, because those are potentially the biggest risks.
Yes, I guess they are. And yeah, I didn't want to make it into a sales call. But I mean, this is what we do help customers with on a daily basis. I find where customers come unstuck is it's like knowing what to do and when. So I find it's quite funny that when we kick off projects, I might say, I'll caveat always by saying I'm not a technical person myself, but have you been aware of this? Are you aware of that? And sometimes you might get some blank faces. So I'll try and like point them in the right direction, or say, if you have nobody at all to help you with this, I can maybe recommend some names, but I'm not a technical person. So we've helped customers all over the world now. There's been one customer that had like 50 FUEs, and then there's other customers that have maybe 500,000 employees. I think we're about 2 months ago, I count them every so often, how many order forms we've reviewed, and it was over 250 then. So we're probably approaching 300 now.
And obviously, you mentioned there kind of two different sizes of scale there. I mean, in the ideal world, I appreciate it changes per organization, but who should kind of own that, the RISE deal and the contract validation and that kind of deciding off of the deal?
So I would say a deal this strategic should be owned at sea level, right? I mean,
Hmm.
but different people should own different things. So
Yep.
for some of my projects, what I'll do, if people are trying to like gather resources, I create like a matrix with the customer like departments and stuff. So different customers will have different departments, or they might have outsourced providers. But I mean, we would say, for example, so if it's anything to do with SLAs or support, that should be done by the technical team. If it's anything related to contract review, procurement, software asset management, and legal. If it's to do with data processing, legal. If it's to do with like the bill of material, software asset management, followed by procurement. And it's just like getting everyone together, lined up, and having like multiple work streams for people doing what they need to do, and then making it all join together in the end.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know I've spoken to someone in another episode, and they kind of mentioned how organizations divide and conquer, in that they will always try to speak to people who they think they might be able to get a better deal. So I presume that might be a similar kind of strategy in regards to, not the strategy, but that SAP might just naturally go towards someone who may not know as much as others when it comes to the rise kind of risks.
Well, I think, I mean, SAP will, as a software company, as any software company, they're just going to want to sell the deal. So I would say when they're reaching out to customers, it's probably more they'll focus maybe not necessarily, they'll focus on like the people that will be using the software
Uh-huh.
or implementing it, and that's like by and large like the technical teams. But then I mean, you might see, and I see some customers where SAP have the closest relationship with procurement. So I wouldn't say it's like anything untoward in SAP's part, but more so that yeah, it's just making sure that if SAP does reach out to, like, say, for example, a technical team, that there's like a
Uh-huh.
process in place
Yep.
whereby, procurement and software management would get involved in the early stages so
Uh-huh.
that everyone is aware of what's happening.
So as a final questioning, if you are a SAM manager listening, and you don't have SAP expertise, so what are the three questions that you think they should ask before approving any AI investment, or signing a RISE deal?
So I would say, so first of all, know where the demand or the request has come from. Okay. So if it's a case of, we think we might need this, but we're not quite sure how or when we're going to use it, then, approach that with a high level of skepticism. But then on the flip side, so let's say you're a company that's on ECC, and 15 years ago you negotiated the deal of the century, and there's like high volume discounts and stuff. I mean, that might have been a good deal then, but if and on paper it still might be, but if you've evolved, if your organization has evolved, if there's been organizational changes, or you're not using a lot of the software, there might be a lot of bagginess in that. So it might make sense to move to Rise in that regard. So just so number one, like know where has the demand come from, and
Hmm.
validate that. Okay. And then the second thing would be just to understand that, have you considered all of your options? All right. So it might be that you're like caught up in like the frenzy of, okay, I need the 2027 deadline is less than 2 years away. I need to move to Rise because I'm drinking Kool-Aid. But like, make sure that you understand what your options are. For some organizations, Rise with SAP, and I'm not sure this is a popular opinion with a lot of my peers or not, but I think for some customers, it can be a good deal. There's a hell of
Hmm.
a lot of paperwork you have to review. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But for some organizations, particularly if they have like a fit to standard approach with limited internal resources, it can be a good deal. So it's like just understanding that you know your options so that you can see, okay, if you're a larger organization, maybe you'll have to like more gradually and cautiously do it, because you'll have other factors like maybe hardware refreshes, or hyperscaler contracts that you'll have to renegotiate. Okay, the third one, God, you've got me now. I'll have to think about that. Just, I would say, make, I find on my LinkedIn feed, it's a case of, you'll scroll down and you'll have a lot of people saying that, like giving horror stories about how
Hmm.
this customer got, hoodwinked, and now they're on the hook for 200 million. And then you'll scroll down a couple more and it'll be, it's like everyone in the world is moving to Rise immediately. And I would say, just like focus on the facts, just like strip away all of that bullshit, and just like really focus on, okay, this is my organization, this is what I'm using now, and this is what I'm going to use in the future, and make a plan based on that and the facts, and you'll get to where you need to be faster.
Yeah. And that's like it goes for everything, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to purchase software by just putting your finger up in the air, then it's always going to be a bad deal. So it's kind of
Yeah.
patience and understanding and building the foundation of what you need to do, the knowledge
Yeah.
to be able to go into a negotiation. Very, very important. But that's why we have people like yourself, Sharon. So once again, big shout out. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your knowledge. And certainly if anyone is interested in speaking to Sharon about Xactitude, I'll blow her trumpet again. Please do reach out to her. She's absolutely amazing and obviously knows her stuff. So yeah, link will all be in the episode.
Thank you so much, Shaun, for having me on. It was great to be invited.
No problem.